President Biden expected to sign more executive orders today dealing with issues of equity, including police reform and public housing. Tomorrow, the focus turns to climate change. The president expected to sign an order directing agencies to determine the expansiveness of banning oil and gas leases on federal land. Joining me now, North Dakota Senator, Senate Armed Services and Budget Committee member, Senator Kevin Cramer. Senator, what are the concerns for you and your state over this administration's actions on energy?
Well, good morning, Dagan. One of the issues you just mentioned, of course, was the ban on drilling on federal lands and the study of drilling on federal lands. North Dakota, one of the reasons North Dakota is second in the country, only to Texas, in oil production is because we don't have a lot of federal lands. But there's still a fair bit of drilling in the heart of the Bakken in North Dakota that is on federal land, and it'll have a major impact on the ability to be energy secure, to create those good middle-class American jobs, to be less dependent on foreign oil. So it's a big deal, to say the least. And then you have things like the executive order on the Keystone XL pipeline, or the removal of the presidential permit. That means we're going to be more dependent on foreign oil from someplace other than Canada. It means it's going to have an impact on our relationship with our closest neighbor and biggest trading partner in Canada. And by the way, ironically, today, as you mentioned, he's going to focus his executive orders on equity or equality and economic equality. Well, there is no group of people more negatively impacted by higher energy costs and fewer energy jobs than the middle class and lower income Americans. So it's very ironic that this president that wants to be a jobs creator and wants equality would start out by attacking an industry that provides lots of opportunity for every American.
The canceling the Keystone pipeline, the unions were upset. It cost, by some estimates, 10,000 union jobs, high-paying blue-collar jobs, and the cost for workers and others are, numerous. So, as a senator, what can you do to stop this? These are all moves for left-wing climate change activists. And literally, with the Keystone being canceled, the Biden administration has turned its back on the union. So as a senator, what can you do to stop or reverse some of this move to damage our energy independence and damage our role as the biggest producer in the world?
It's interesting, Dagan. I was actually a regulator when the original Keystone pipeline went through North Dakota, and I carried the portfolio that permitted, every inch of that pipeline. As a senator, you are somewhat limited. Now, when I was in the House and in the majority, I actually carried and passed the Keystone permitting bill during the Obama administration. The problem is it couldn't get passed in the Senate. I would think that something similar here could happen, but I doubt we could ever pass something that would override the president. Therefore, the one thing as a senator that I intend to do, and is part of why I voted against Janet Yellen's confirmation last night, is we do have the opportunity through our advise and consent role with people that are nominated for confirmation to challenge them on the issues of energy security and energy development, job creation, tax policy, regulatory policy. And we have to, I think, hold them to account and not just roll over like a lot of Republicans, frankly, are, and supporting Joe Biden's nominees that are very anti-energy and anti-jobs.
Well, did you get that from Janet Yellen, the now Treasury Secretary?
Well, with Janet Yellen's interest in raising taxes on pretty much everything, she's a climate activist extraordinaire. She wants to raise taxes on people, middle-class Americans. All of these things are bad for our economy, and they're certainly bad for energy development in our country.
Well, it will hurt. Like, if you look at just the short term, the 60-day freeze on new leases, drilling leases on federal lands, more to come. Again, we were talking about the study of that. It will hurt not just red states, but if you look at New Mexico, federal land accounts for most of the oil production and natural gas in that state, and 20% of Mexico's budget comes from mineral royalties that are shared by the federal government with the states. So this is not, if there is financial damage to these blue states even, then you might have a pushback against what the administration is doing.
Well, so there are a number of states, New Mexico's chief among them, of course, which is a large federal land state, as you said, has a lot of oil and gas opportunity and potential and activity. And now you have New Mexico Democrats up in arms over, or at least challenging the president's decision to do this. Well, they should have been a little more active, and certainly the voters could have been a little more active prior to electing another Democratic senator from New Mexico. But there is hope when you have that kind of pushback. Now, you also have people like Joe Manchin, who comes from not so much an oil state, but gas and certainly coal in West Virginia. You know, there needs to be a bipartisan effort to at least sound the warning alarms. Remember this too, Dagan. I mean, this is a president that wants to spend a lot of money. Taking revenue away from the federal government certainly is manifest in stopping drilling on federal lands. Those are federal resources. Those resources generate revenue that will otherwise have to be filled either by borrowing or other tax increases other places. On top of that, in the case, again, going back to Janet Yellen, she advocates for a $40 a ton carbon tax. So that raises the cost of everything that we produce, everything we develop, everything we grow, everything that we manufacture in this country. And it starts with a $40 a ton tax on energy development.
I want to move on to impeachment round two. For the first time in American history, an article of impeachment of a former president was submitted from the House to the Senate last night. The article alleges that President Trump incited the January 6th riot on Capitol Hill. In order to be convicted, 17 Republican senators would have to vote in favor of impeachment. Senator, where do the Republicans stand right now on that?
Well, I doubt there are 7, quite honestly, and I'm certain there aren't 17, at least not today, and I don't know how there could be, because two things. One, as you know, the constitutionality of even doing this with a former president, not a sitting president, is questionable, to say the least. But even if it is, and of course the Senate governs itself, so we'll make that decision with a majority, and no doubt that means we'll move forward. But after that, the president's own words, the very transcript of his speech, is clear that there was not at least a criminal level of incitement that I can see anyway. The president told these people to go and protest peacefully and patriotically. They're translating that into violently and somehow giving him the liability, or laying the liability on him. I don't think his words were very good. I think it was wrong. I think it was too much. I think there were some problems with his speech, but I don't think you can lay the blame, and I certainly don't lay the specific blame for the actions of people, criminals, frankly, with him. So, and it certainly is counter to any desire by the sitting president to encourage unity in this country.
Well, speaking of that, just before we go, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has moved to drop his request for Democrats to keep the Senate filibuster in place. He had previously wanted it to stay in exchange for negotiating the reallocation of power in the Senate. But, Senator, do you think the filibuster does stay in place? I think Senator Sinema has come out in favor of keeping it there. Also, Senator Joe Manchin. Will it stay?
Well, Senator Sinema has been rather emphatic about it. Joe has, been a little less so. I personally think as long as the Democrats are in control, as long as Chuck Schumer is the majority leader, he'll use the threat of it as effectively as if it was already removed, because it'll always be a blunt instrument for negotiating with the minority. So for all practical purposes, even though he doesn't get rid of the filibuster, the threat of getting rid of it, and we know that they'll exercise that threat. That's how this all began with Harry Reid at the late stages of a term in the Senate, when he changed it as it related to appellate judges. So I think the filibuster will remain in place, but it will always be on the table for discussion, which means the threat of it serves almost as an equal purpose of having it repealed.
Harry Reid moved first, and that's how President Trump got 3 Supreme Court justices confirmed in just one term. So there are consequences.
That's exactly
if the
right.
Democrats remember that.
That's exactly right. And Mitch McConnell, who I'd like to refer to as the Wizard of Washington, made sure that Donald Trump had 3 nominees to the Supreme Court rather than just 1, which he would have had under almost any other leader.
Right. Senator Kevin Cramer, great to see you, sir. Thank you so much for being here.